The desert stretched endlessly under a punishing sun, waves of heat rising from the cracked earth like ghostly dancers. Sarah Mitchell had been hanging there for what felt like hours, though time had lost all meaning when pain consumed every fiber of your being. Her wrists were bound with coarse rope, arms stretched taut between two gnarled mesquite trees that stood like sentinels in this godforsaken stretch of nowhere. Blood trickled down her arms where the rope had cut into her skin, mixing with sweat and dust until she couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. Her feet barely touched the ground, forcing her to balance on tiptoes that screamed with agony. She'd stopped crying out after the first hour. No one could hear her anyway, and the men who'd left her here wanted to hear her scream when they came back. The Donovan gang had a reputation that stretched from Texas to the Arizona territory. Led by the cruel and calculating Marcus Donovan, they specialized in terror as much as theft. Sarah had made the mistake of witnessing them rob the bank in Silver Creek, and worse, she'd recognized Marcus from a wanted poster. She'd thought she could slip away unnoticed, but nothing escaped Marcus's attention. Within an hour, they tracked her down at the boarding house where she worked, dragged her onto a horse, and brought her to this isolated spot. Marcus had smiled when he ordered his men to string her up. It was the smile of a man who enjoyed others' suffering, who fed on fear like it was sustenance. He promised they'd be back after dark to finish what they started, and the way his eyes had gleamed told Sarah exactly what horrors awaited her. Better to die now, she thought, but her body refused to cooperate. Some stubborn part of her clung to hope even when reason said there was none. The sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon when she heard the sound of hoofbeats. Her heart seized with terror. They were early. She wasn't ready, would never be ready. But as the rider came into view, she realized it wasn't Marcus or any of his men. It was a single rider on a paint horse, moving with the easy confidence of someone who belonged to this harsh landscape. The cowboy rode up slowly, his silhouette sharp against the orange sky. He was tall in the saddle, wearing worn leather chaps and a dark hat pulled low over his eyes. A rifle rested across his lap, and a pair of Colt revolvers hung at his hips. When he was close enough, Sarah could see his face was weathered and hard, with lines carved by sun and experience. His eyes were the color of steel, and they held a coldness that made even her fear pause. He dismounted in one fluid motion, his boots hitting the ground with barely a sound. For a long moment, he just looked at her, taking in the ropes, the blood, the state she was in. His jaw tightened, a muscle working beneath the stubble on his cheek. "Name's Cole Brennan," he said, his voice low and rough as gravel. "And I'm guessing you didn't tie yourself up there for fun." "Please," Sarah croaked, her throat raw from screaming and thirst. "Cut me down. They're coming back. They'll kill us both." Cole pulled a knife from his belt, the blade catching the fading sunlight. "Nobody's killing anybody today except maybe me." He moved behind her and began sawing through the rope on her left wrist. "Who did this?" "The Donovan gang. Marcus Donovan himself." Cole's hands paused for just a fraction of a second. When he spoke again, his voice was even quieter, even more dangerous. "Marcus Donovan. That's a name I know." The rope on her left hand gave way, and Sarah collapsed forward as her arm dropped. Cole caught her before she fell, supporting her weight as he cut through the second rope. When both her hands were free, she crumpled against him, her legs unable to hold her. He lowered her gently to the ground and offered her a canteen. Sarah drank greedily, water spilling down her chin and neck. It was the most beautiful thing she'd ever tasted. When she'd had enough, she wiped her mouth and looked up at Cole, really seeing him for the first time. There was something about him, something in the set of his shoulders and the way his hand never strayed far from his guns, that spoke of a man who'd seen violence, and wasn't afraid of it. "Thank you," she whispered. "But you need to go. When they find me gone, when they find you here, they'll hunt you down. There are 6 of them, and they're all killers." Cole was scanning the horizon, his eyes constantly moving. 6 men. That's a fair fight where I come from. He looked down at her. "Can you ride?" "I don't know. I think so. That'll have to be good enough. There's a cave about 2 miles north," hidden behind a rock slide. We'll hole up there until you can move better. Then we'll figure out what comes next. What comes next is they'll find us. Marcus doesn't let anyone make a fool of him. He'll bring every man he has. Cole helped her to her feet, steadying her when she swayed. Let me worry about Marcus Donovan. You just focus on staying conscious. He got her onto his horse, then swung up behind her. Sarah leaned back against his chest, too exhausted and in too much pain to worry about propriety. Cole's arm wrapped around her waist, holding her secure, and they started north at a steady pace. They reached the cave just as the sun disappeared completely. Cole had been right about the location. Hidden behind fallen boulders and overgrown with brush, the entrance was nearly invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. He lifted Sarah down and carried her inside, laying her on his bedroll. He built a small fire near the entrance, positioned so the smoke would dissipate before anyone could spot it, and tended to her wounds with surprising gentleness. You know medicine? Sarah asked as he cleaned the rope burns on her wrists. Know enough to keep you alive. Had plenty of practice. Are you a doctor? I'm a lot of things, none of them that respectable. Sarah studied his face in the firelight. You're not afraid of them. Of the Donovan gang. Why? Cole was quiet for a long moment, wrapping bandages around her wrists with steady hands. Because Marcus Donovan killed someone I cared about 2 years ago. Little town in New Mexico. They robbed a stage and when the driver's daughter tried to run, Marcus shot her in the back. She was 15 years old. Her name was Emily. The weight of grief in his voice told Sarah everything she needed to know. You loved her. She was my niece. My sister's only child. I've been tracking Marcus ever since, but he's smart. Keeps moving, never stays in one place long enough for me to catch up. He tied off the bandage and sat back. Until now. This isn't your fight, Sarah said, though even as the words left her mouth, she knew they were pointless. You're wrong about that. This has been my fight for 2 years. You just gave me an opportunity I've been waiting for. They didn't have to wait long. Around midnight, Sarah woke to Cole's hand over her mouth. He pressed a finger to his lips, then pointed toward the cave entrance. In the moonlight, she could see shadows moving. The Donovan gang had found them. Cole checked his revolvers, his movements calm and methodical. He whispered instructions to Sarah. Stay here. Stay quiet. No matter what you hear, you don't move, you don't scream. Understand? She nodded, terror clawing at her throat. Cole moved to the cave entrance, keeping to the shadows. Sarah could hear voices outside, Marcus's distinctive drawl rising above the others. They were arguing about whether anyone was actually in the cave or if they'd been following a false trail. Then Cole stepped out into the moonlight, and everything happened at once. Marcus Donovan, Cole called out, his voice carrying across the still night air. Been looking for you for a long time. There was a moment of stunned silence. Then Marcus laughed, a sound devoid of humor. Well now. Cole Brennan. Heard you were dead. Not yet. But you will be if you take one more step toward that cave. That's my property in there. Girl witnessed something she shouldn't have. Need to clean up loose ends. Cole's hand hovered over his gun. Touch her again and die. That's a promise. Marcus gestured to his men, who began to spread out. 6 against 1, Brennan. I don't like your odds. Then you don't know me very well. What happened next was something Sarah would remember for the rest of her life. Cole moved with a speed that seemed impossible, his hands a blur as he drew both revolvers. The night exploded with gunfire, muzzle flashes lighting up the darkness like lightning strikes. Men shouted, screamed, fell. Sarah pressed herself against the cave wall, her hands over her ears, but she couldn't block out the sound. When the shooting finally stopped, the silence that followed was deafening. Sarah waited, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. Then Cole appeared in the entrance, silhouetted against the moonlight. He was bleeding from a graze on his shoulder, but he was standing. It's over, he said simply. Sarah crawled to the entrance and looked out. 4 bodies lay motionless on the ground. 2 more, including Marcus, were wounded but alive, their weapons scattered beyond reach. Cole had disarmed them with surgical precision. Marcus was clutching his side, blood seeping between his fingers. He looked up at Cole with hatred burning in his eyes. "Go ahead. Finish it." Cole walked over to him, his gun pointed steadily at Marcus's chest. For a long moment, he just stood there, and Sarah held her breath. Then Cole lowered his weapon. "No. You're going to hang legal, in front of a proper judge. Emily deserves that much. You'll swing from a rope with everyone watching, knowing exactly what you did." He tied up both wounded men, then helped Sarah onto his horse. They rode through the night toward Silver Creek, where Cole turned Marcus and his surviving gang member over to the sheriff along with Sarah's testimony. The reward money for the Donovan gang was substantial, but Cole signed most of it over to families who'd lost loved ones to Marcus's violence. Sarah never went back to the boarding house. She stayed in Silver Creek, opened a small shop, and built a life that was entirely her own. Cole stayed too, though he never said it was because of her. But sometimes, when the sun set over the desert and the air turned cool, she'd find him on her porch, a cup of coffee in his hand and that same watchful look in his steel-gray eyes. He'd saved her life that day between those 2 mesquite trees. But more than that, he'd given her back her future. And some debts could never be repaid, only honored by living well.